This is rock and roll is about you feel like you're levitating.
It didn't really answer particularly to what Keith Richards was about.
We're trying desperately to do something which in some way would play catch up to the... Talking nonsense and offering pills and joints to everyone.
And you go for those moments where you actually, fly.
Somebody just kind of went...
They returned to their essential kind of blues animus.
I don't listen to it. This is amazing.
The best feelings in the world. It may be only rock and roll, but telling you what, that's the shit.
It was something special. It was thick, and it was all-enveloping, and it was exciting, and it was rock.
Blues man who still delivers, who still cares.
I'm not getting old, I'm evolving.
He's still passionate about his music.
1, 2, 3, let's go.
Watch it!
By 1968, the empire of the Rolling Stones was beginning to crack. The newspapers called them dangerous. The police treated them like enemies of the state.
Felt like an explosive moment. People felt this sensation that something was going on that had never happened before, that they'd been waiting to happen.
We had riots every night. It was insane. I think they just wanted to be part of that rebellious thing that we were instigating. They weren't attacking us. It was always having goes at the police.
What makes you think there would be a riot? Well, the Stones seem to have a history of creating violence wherever they go.
And beneath the headlines, the band itself was drifting into uncertainty.
Now we're entering the area of social unrest, manifesting itself in a crowd situation. You're just merely the catalyst of the crowd. It could be anything, football match, but you're it on that day.
The golden age of swinging London was fading into paranoia and exhaustion.
And then you've got more and more different drugs coming in. LSD and cocaine, heroin and all these things.
What do you think of LSD? Is it nice? It's very nice. I think LSD is very nice.
Psychedelia had swallowed rock music whole. Bands were disappearing into orchestras, costumes, and abstract experimentation.
I think the Stones felt slightly out of place in that whole Carnaby Street caftan wearing era because they knew it wasn't really them.
Even the Stones, once the raw, snarling opposite of the Beatles, seemed lost inside the haze.
It didn't really answer particularly to what Keith Richards was about. Keith Richards was not George Harrison. He was really still wedded to a notion of music as black, rooted and intense and soulful. He was not interested in beads and bells.
Sgt. Pepper? Well, that's an absurdity. The only way it was like Sgt. Pepper was that it had a really strange cover. A lot of the songs are very strong. They're very good songwriters, Jagger and Richards, and they didn't write many Duff songs back then. They were hitting it almost every time. As some of them were more trivial than others, and I would say that's true of several of the songs on that record. But as melodic and rhythmic constructions, they're strong.
Their 1967 album, Their Satanic Majesties Request, confused critics and fans alike.
I think they were really in a bit of a mess around the time of Satanic Majesties. Not least because Brian Jones was really going off the rails.
It's not serious, but on the other hand, it's not simply parody. It's not as if there's no sense that that they're not interested in these realms of experience, this kind of fantasy, this kind of sense of psychological possibility. They're dabbling in it in an interested way. Certainly not convinced, because they're never convinced of anything, but on the other hand, not just making fun of it, and not only because had they done that, they would have really outraged the fan base, but also because that was their attitude, I think. I don't know.
It was ambitious, strange, but deeply disconnected from the dirty rhythm and blues spirit that had once made the Stones feel dangerous.
We're trying desperately to do something which in some way would play catch up to the Beatles' psychedelic Sgt. Pepper's. And they came up with their Satanic Majesties, but it was far too indulgent, not directed or controlled enough. And it just became a kind of piece of self-indulgent nonsense, really.
I think the Stones did struggle to find a new direction around about the time, because they didn't have what the Beatles had. They didn't have that kind of sophistication in terms of songwriting or production in the studio, their own version of psychedelia on Satanic Majesties, whereas the Beatles just forged ahead, inventing a new language for pop. The Stones couldn't really keep up with that because they couldn't write ballads like McCartney.
I saw a film today, oh boy.
I think it was only when they returned to their essential kind of blues animus, if you like, that spirit, that essence, that they kind of got themselves properly on track with what the Rolling Stones were about.
Worse still, chaos surrounded the band off stage. Drug raids, court cases, public outrage.
And those drugs were a great interest to the press and the general public. The News of the World was a newspaper that liked to reveal the faults in society, and they follow people, they put private detectives on people, and
So we're all coming down, and it's a very smooth come down. And we're just sitting around smoking a couple of joints, and bang, bang, bang.
The News of the World had got Brian down at Speakeasy talking nonsense and offering pills and joints to everyone, and they reported it as Jagger. Jagger immediately sued, spotted a wonderful opportunity, sued, and at that point the News of the World, I think, felt that their best counter strategy was to set up a bust, which I think is what happened.
the News of the World told the police there was a big drug party and they should go and break it up and arrest everybody.
A national newspaper had tipped off the police that it would be worth their while to raid Richard's home for drugs on the Sunday afternoon, and the raid was carried out on that Sunday evening.
There was a consciousness in the United States about what was going on with the Stones in the kind of burgeoning counterculture, because there was a sense in which a lot of people were starting to take drugs. And, you know, that element of who was going to get targeted or, you know, what the risks were, you know, really came to the fore with the Rolling Stones. And of course, then, you know, The Who and to a degree the Beatles, you know, speaking out in support just was one of those moments when you realized, well, this is the counterculture. This is something else. This is, you know, this is more than just a kind of, you know, a momentary blip in pop culture. Like, this is going to be a cultural battle. And in many ways, you know, those battles are still being fought. But, you know, the Stones were at the heart of it because they became the target.
And at the center of the storm stood Keith Richards, exhausted, hunted by authorities, drowning in excess, yet still carrying the weight of the band's identity on his shoulders.
I've never been in court before, and I can't stand the way he's talking to me. He's calling me reprobate and, you know, the menace to society and all of that. All I said was, sir, I'm not interested in your petty morals, which gave me a year in the slammer.
There was a dead silence as the judge added, you will go to prison for 1 year. And Richard, who earlier had talked in his evidence of what he called petty morals, went down to the cells without expression.
Emotionally speaking, it was very difficult because they thought we were going to be put away, never make another record for years and years, and people wanted to have prison sentences. It wasn't just a fine and a rap across the knuckles.
We just kind of thought it was the end of the band, really. We never knew who was going to be in or out of jail and whether there was a future and all that.
Did you feel that you were being persecuted for being a Rolling Stone?
It was obvious that notoriety plus the press thing turned it into, yes, it was a good buzz for the police, wasn't it? And fun for the press.
The Stones were not merely struggling creatively. They were facing an existential crisis.
London. It's years since such crowds gathered to await an appeal verdict. But this was the Rolling Stones case, with the fans out in force. When Mick Jagger was conditionally discharged and Keith Richards' sentence quashed, the pop idols drove off, the shadow of jail no longer over them.
I think I looked at it at the time as like, they can try all they want, they won't make it stick because I've got all these people out there. And unless I murdered somebody, they're going to insist that I'm out.
You've been targeted, but then you can revel in your rebelliousness, if you want. Because people are doing that for you. Don't forget, people are saying, oh, it's awful, they've been targeted.
Who were they now? A psychedelic pop group? A scandal-ridden relic of the British invasion? Or still the greatest rock and roll band in the world?
Keith was buying records which, by his own admission, he never really had time to listen to. And then come sort of 67, the Stones were finally able to take a little bit of time off, get off the treadmill. And Richards has said that he actually unpacked a lot of these records he'd bought and started, absorbing himself in American music again. He started studying it again in a way, and I think that, coupled with the way the Stones had been scapegoated and vilified by the British establishment with the whole Redlands bust, it kind of focused him again.
The Stones rediscovered themselves. It was not psychedelic. It was not delicate. It was not fashionable. It was rock and roll stripped to the bone.
It cemented our relationships with our generation, with the public. And it sort of gave us a badge of honor in a way. To me, it just made me like, okay, now you know who I am. You've basically given me a license now. Yeah, it's Jesse James time. I mean, the cops turned me into a criminal. That's when I started to carry a shooter in America.
So the outlaw was born.
Yeah. I mean, it was fully blown. And that was when you really put the black hat on, I mean, before that, it was just sort of off grey.
Jumpin' Jack Flash was the turning point. And I think that was the point at which Keith really started to take over the sound of the band, because he'd now got his confidence, right? And he realised that he'd done something a bit special.
And the tensions and the confusion that was going on around that time. Some people calling it revolution, other people calling it half-assed anarchy. Really, it was just chaos.
The riff moved with violent confidence. Part Chicago blues, part street fight.
Jumpin' Jack Flash, which became one of their biggest hits and one of the most identifiable Stones tunes, largely because of the way he finally starts treating the guitar as a big orchestra with that open tuning. And really, again, the whole idea is simple bars, meaning you wouldn't have to re-finger notes. You simply put your hand down and it's a chord with one finger. And he uses this, exploits this whole idea to great measure in Jumpin' Jack Flash. If you look at just the first opening few chords.
Richards attacked the guitar not like a virtuoso, but like a man trying to summon rhythm from the earth itself.
Well, in a way, I kind of felt that everybody else was writing the script for me. And you're going to do what I can't. Okay. It's a very easy role to slip into. There's a slot available, and it was just built for me.
every chord slammed forward with reckless swagger.
Just the fact that he decided to kind of, experiment with recording the guitar in that quite sort of punky lo-fi way is sort of such a rejection of the over orchestrated aspects of Satanic Majesties, and it's just almost like saying we're a punk rock band.
And suddenly the fog lifted. The Stones remembered who they were.
When Jumpin' Jack Flash came out, it was like, somebody just kind of went and just kind of blew the fog away. It was just like, I remember a friend of mine, we were kids, it just kind of come up to me and just said, God, have you heard the new Stones single? It sounds like Chuck Berry. That was a good thing. That was a sense of, the Stones kind of getting back to what they did best.
The title was born before a single lyric was written. When Mick Jagger added lyrics about surviving chaos, I was born in a crossfire hurricane. The song became more than a comeback single. It became a statement of survival.
I think Keith has never really lost it. I mean, the Stones' music has obviously gone through long periods of being very poor, when Keith has not had his eye on the ball. But, he's always come back with something. There's like one track on this album or a ballad on that album where you can still hear, undiluted Keith.
According to author Victor Bachris, the Crossfire Hurricane line was Richard's own contribution, a direct reference to his birth in Dartford, England, in 1943, during World War II bombing raids. The recording sessions carried a sense of urgency. Producer Jimmy Miller amplified the band's rawness instead of smoothing it away.
People like Jimmy Miller coming onto the scene from America were very important too at this time. They did give them a kind of transatlantic sound, if you want to call it that, a kind of ubiquitous Americana with the Brit rock, pop, whatever you want to call it thing as well, which was an amalgamation of their sound.
The recording itself and the technology of it, record something and listen to it back. Musical history tells is a brand new invention.
Jimmy Miller was incredibly important to the Rolling Stones. I mean, Keith aptly described him, an incredible rhythm man. And when you listen to, those records he produced with the Stones, everything is a rhythm instrument. Jagger's vocal, the guitars, everything's moving, the cowbells, all of this stuff is rolling through. He'd get into the studio and play them himself, something that the Stones would absolutely respect.
Charlie Watts's drums marched like heavy machinery.
Jimmy Miller was a very clever drummer. He actually played drums on one of the tracks, I think. I'm not sure. He certainly had a stab at Jumpin' Jack Flash at one time. And there was one track he did that Charlie couldn't do, and I think he actually does play it on the album. Charlie was very good about that, actually. He said afterwards, I remember doing an interview with him, and he said, Jimmy Miller taught me something about drumming at that point, and I always remembered it. He wasn't a great live drummer, but he was a good drummer in the studio. And Charlie was, as usual, very gracious about that sort of thing, which somebody else might have been quite pissed off about, I would suspect.
Bill Wyman locked the groove to the ground. Richards pushed his guitar tone into distortion and grime. Everything sounded alive again, dangerous again.
Jumpin' Jack Flash is the first inklings of actually enjoying making a record again, and there was a certain sense of direction in the sound.
I went to a small recording studio in Morden, M-O-R-D-E-N, Morden, and there was my mate Stu and Mick and Keith in the studio, and they played me. I think I was probably the first music journalist to hear Jumpin' Jack Flash. And I listened to it and I thought, this is amazing. This is a totally different sound from what you've actually been doing before. Where have you got it from? And Keith gave me some convoluted explanation of how he'd recorded his guitar through a Philips cassette player, stood the microphone in front of the amp. I didn't really understand it. I'm not technically that good, you know, but I knew that he was telling me, you know, this was how they got the sound, and I knew the sound was something special. It was thick, and it was all-enveloping, and it was exciting, and it was rock.
The magic of recording is that you can actually capture an atmosphere and a feeling, and it's there forever for everybody, and that turns it into a possibility of an art form.
For the first time in years, the Rolling Stones no longer sounded like they were chasing trends. They sounded eternal.
That whole album gave us the opportunity to do these weirdo experiments. Just read the titles and you get a feel of what 1967, 68 were like. It was just time to take a break, and this was our way of coming back. You know, we're itching to go. Going to make a record, it depends how you actually feel. I had a definite feeling that we were starting to find the Rolling Stones. A lot of the subject matter that you write about, it depends what's going on around you. You just mirror the society that you live in.
When Jumpin' Jack Flash exploded onto radio waves in 1968, it was as if the band had kicked down the door to their own resurrection. Audiences immediately heard the difference.
The impact that Jumpin' Jack Flash made at the time is hard to understand now. I mean, you had to be there at the time to, you know, suddenly the silence was broken, and with a bang, you know, with a great record.
The Stones were no longer trapped in psychedelic fantasy. They were back in the gutter where they belonged. And from that moment forward, an extraordinary creative rebirth began. Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street.
I think Keith, to this day, is still in touch with his muse, if you like. You know, he really is like Muddy Waters in his last years. I mean, he sees no reason why he shouldn't be doing this. He's like an old blues man who still delivers, who still cares, who's still passionate about his music.
One of the greatest runs in rock history emerged directly from the ashes of that crisis, and at the center of it all stood Keith Richards' riff. Simple, dirty, immortal.
This is rock and roll is about. You feel like you're levitating, and you go for those moments where you actually, you know, fly.
A riff that did more than launch a hit song. It rescued a band standing on the edge of collapse. Because sometimes the survival of an empire depends not on grand speeches or elaborate reinvention, but on a few savage chords played in the darkness before dawn.
The best feelings in the world, it may be only rock and roll. That's the Shears.